And then at 9:30, which is the time that I thought, right, I need to check, I stood up, and at the same time, Matt stood up.
No, you stay.
Matt and Rachel were actually staying in the apartment next to us, 5B.
It was a warm spring evening in a quiet coastal town in Portugal. The breeze carried the faint scent of salt through whitewashed walls, and the waves rolled gently against the shore. Praia da Luz was the kind of place families chose for peace, laughter, and safety. Yet on May 3, 2007, it became the backdrop of one of the most haunting disappearances in modern history. Inside apartment 5A of the Ocean Club Resort, a 3-year-old British girl vanished without a trace while her parents dined just a few steps away. That little girl was Madeleine McCann. The first moments after her disappearance were filled with chaos. Kate McCann's desperate cries echoed through the holiday complex. Neighbors rushed to help. Doors were flung open. Curtains billowed in the night air. People searched frantically, voices rising in fear. And yet, amidst the panic, another sound emerged: silence. Not the silence of the night, but the silence of the people closest to the McCanns, their 7 friends who had been vacationing with them, forever remembered as the Tapas 7. In theory, those friends should have been the strongest allies in a moment of crisis. In the search for truth, you would expect each of them to speak openly, to share every detail, every memory, no matter how small. But what followed was something altogether stranger. Their statements to police seemed oddly aligned, their timelines filled with gaps, their recollections blurred. And in the years since, as public attention grew and theories multiplied, their silence has stretched on, unbroken for nearly 2 decades. What explains this? Was it loyalty to their friends Kate and Jerry? Was it fear of being accused themselves? Or was it something more subtle? A quiet agreement, unspoken but binding, that no one would break the chain and bring new questions crashing down upon the group? Imagine, for a moment, if it were your child who had vanished. Imagine your closest friends were the last ones to see her. Wouldn't you expect them to tell the full truth, even if it was uncomfortable? But what if telling the truth meant exposing their own mistakes, their own negligence? What if the truth risked their reputations, their careers, even their families back home? This is not just the story of a missing child, it is also the story of human memory, of the weight of fear, and of how a circle of friends may have chosen silence over revelation. The pact of silence surrounding the Tapas 7 has become one of the most unsettling mysteries of the Madeleine McCann case. And perhaps, hidden within that silence, lies the truth that has eluded the world for 17 years. On the evening of May 3, 2007, the Ocean Club in Praia da Luz was alive with the calm rhythm of holidaymakers settling into dinner and families retreating after a long day. For the McCanns and their circle of friends, it was the same routine as the nights before. The children were put to bed, the adults gathered at the Tapas bar, and a system of informal checks was meant to bridge the fragile line between leisure and responsibility. But what would later unravel in interviews and police reports was that this system was neither precise nor secure, and it hinged on a moment that may never have truly happened. At around 6:30 p.m., David Payne, one of the McCanns' closest friends, claimed to have stopped by apartment 5A. According to his testimony, he saw Kate with the children, including Madeleine, who appeared alive, well, and ready for bed. This small detail seemed trivial at first, but in the days and years that followed, Payne's account would become a keystone of the timeline. Investigators and the public clung to it because it represented something precious, a final confirmed sighting of Madeleine by someone outside her immediate family. Yet no one else, not hotel staff, not neighbors, not passing guests, ever confirmed seeing Madeleine after that moment. Payne's visit, if it occurred as described, was the last independent anchor in the evening's chronology. Without it, the record falls into troubling uncertainty. From 6:40 p.m. onward, Madeleine's presence exists only in the statements of her parents and their friends. No photographs, no video surveillance, no third-party verification, just words on paper. The timeline after Payne's supposed sighting was reconstructed as follows. Jerry McCann returned to the apartment briefly around 7:00 p.m. after playing tennis. By 8:35 p.m., both Kate and Jerry left for dinner, joining their friends at the Tapas bar. The checks on the children were said to begin soon after, staggered every 20 to 30 minutes. Then, shortly after 10 p.m., Kate discovered Madeleine was gone. But if Payne's testimony falters, if he never truly saw Madeleine alive between 6:30 and 6:40, then a vast gap of 3.5 hours emerges in which her whereabouts are unverified. That gap is not a crack in the timeline. It is a canyon. It shifts the possible window of disappearance back into the early evening, raising the chilling possibility that whatever happened to Madeleine occurred long before the dinner, and that later recollections were reconstructed to fit a more palatable story. Investigators faced another problem. Payne's visit left no physical trace. No witness recalled seeing him approach or leave apartment 5A. No staff member noted his presence. Even the details he gave, observing Kate and the children in their evening routine, could not be independently confirmed. It is a moment suspended in testimony alone, and testimony is fragile. Years later, observers of the case put the stakes plainly. If Payne's sighting was fabricated, whether deliberately or simply misremembered, it widens the disappearance window beyond recognition. A wider window means more doubt. It destabilizes every check, every statement, every effort to lock the narrative into certainty. And once doubt enters, it spreads, eroding the trust placed in each recollection that followed. The haunting truth is this: without Payne's sighting, Madeleine was not seen alive by anyone outside the McCann circle after 6:30 p.m. That means the group itself became the sole custodians of the story. Every timeline, every testimony, every version of events rests on their words alone. And as history has shown, when memory, fear, and pressure converge, words can shift, bend, and even fracture under the weight of scrutiny. It was here, in those early evening hours, that the fragile framework of the Madeleine McCann case was laid, a framework built not on solid evidence, but on a single account that may or may not have been true. In the hours following the discovery of Madeleine's disappearance, panic bled into confusion. Police were called, neighbors alerted, and frantic searches began. But amid the chaos, another detail quietly surfaced, one that would come to define the psychology of the group. Sometime that night, before formal police interviews began, a handwritten timeline was produced. It wasn't an official document, nor was it the product of investigators. Instead, it was scrawled on the back of one of Madeleine's storybooks, created by her parents and their friends. This timeline listed who left the table at the Tapas bar, at what time, and which children were supposedly checked. At first glance, it might appear innocent, a group of distressed parents trying to impose order on a night of terror, but the timing of its creation has long raised questions. Why write a collective timeline after Madeleine was already gone, but before police statements were given? Why not wait to provide individual recollections directly to investigators? Psychologists refer to this phenomenon as group memory contamination. Under stress, especially in highly emotional situations, people's memories are not static. They are reconstructive. Every conversation, every prompt, every attempt to get the story straight subtly alters recollections. One friend suggests, "Didn't you check around 9?" Another insists, "No, we were together at that time." Before long, the distinction between what actually happened and what is agreed upon becomes dangerously thin. When Portuguese police discovered the storybook timeline, suspicion deepened. Was it simply an effort to cope with chaos, or was it a quiet attempt to align accounts before official questioning? Both explanations are possible, and perhaps both are true. But either way, what emerged from that scribbled page was not just memory. It was memory filtered through consensus. And therein lies the problem. In criminal investigations, raw memory, unfiltered and uncoordinated, is often the most reliable. The first words spoken in shock, the unpolished recollections, can reveal inconsistencies or truths that fade once people have time to talk. By writing a shared version before their statements, the group may have unintentionally reshaped their own understanding of events. This doesn't necessarily mean there was malice. It could have been a natural, even compassionate, attempt to help one another recall. But in doing so, they blurred the line between truth and narrative. Investigators later noted how closely the group's statements mirrored each other. So closely, in fact, that some analysts believed the alignment was too perfect to be organic. The handwritten timeline remains one of the most haunting artifacts of the case. On one level, it is a desperate attempt by grieving parents and friends to make sense of chaos. On another, it is a symbol of how easily human memory can be reshaped by pressure, fear, and the quiet need for self-preservation. By the time dawn broke over Praia da Luz, the group's collective version of the evening had already begun to harden. And once a shared story sets, it is rarely undone. From the very beginning, one detail stood out as both trivial and devastating: a sliding glass door. Jerry McCann admitted openly that he had left the patio door of apartment 5A unlocked that evening. To him, it was a matter of convenience. The Tapas bar was only a short walk away, and leaving the door open allowed easier access for the routine checks without fumbling with keys. At first glance, this choice seemed like a small risk, the sort of shortcut any parent might take on a relaxed holiday evening. But this single admission set Jerry apart from everyone else in the group. In their own police statements, each of the Tapas 7 emphasized caution. They claimed their apartments were locked, their children secure, their behavior careful. By contrast, Jerry's honesty became an uncomfortable outlier. If he admitted negligence, even in a minor way, then the group's image of responsibility began to crack. And so, in the days that followed, silence wrapped itself around this detail. The others did not confirm Jerry's admission, nor did they openly contradict it. They simply let it fade, leaving his unlocked door to hang in the air, unacknowledged. The fractures widened when Kate McCann reported another detail the night Madeleine disappeared. According to her, the window in the children's bedroom was open, and the curtains were fluttering in the breeze. For her, this was evidence of a break-in, a sign that an intruder had entered the apartment and taken Madeleine. Yet, if that were true, the sliding door Jerry left open suddenly became irrelevant. Why would an abductor choose the difficulty of climbing through a window when an unlocked door offered a far easier path? The contradictions didn't stop there. In the Ocean Club apartments, sliding doors could only be locked from the inside. If the other parents truly locked their doors and left their children behind, they would have been forced to exit through the front doors, carrying keys with them. But if checks were happening every 20 to 30 minutes, that would have required a constant exchange of keys, something no one ever reported doing. Not a single statement mentioned handing keys around. The logistics didn't add up. Investigators began to see the possibility that the emphasis on locked doors was not fact, but strategy. By insisting their apartments were secure, the Tapas 7 distanced themselves from the McCann's negligence, preserving their own image as cautious parents. Jerry's admission was quietly isolated, a necessary sacrifice that allowed the others to align themselves as more careful, more responsible. This subtle shift is what psychologists call protective alignment, the small but deliberate adjustment of details to keep a group inside the same safe zone. Not an overt conspiracy, but a quiet calibration designed to protect everyone from the weight of scrutiny. Once such alignment begins, it rarely stops with a single detail: the unlocked door, the open window. These were not just points of entry into apartment 5A, they became points of fracture in the story itself, cracks through which suspicion seeped. And as those cracks deepened, the silence of the group grew even more impenetrable. As investigators dug deeper into the events of May 3rd, the cracks in the group's story widened into unsettling contradictions. Central to the evening's timeline were the child-checking rounds, a routine said to be carefully shared among the Tapas 7. But when each person's statement was scrutinized, the details shifted like sand. Matt Oldfield, one of the McCann's friends, initially claimed he had checked on the children in apartment 5A at around 9:30 p.m. According to his first version, he had looked inside the bedroom and seen the children sleeping peacefully. That would have placed Madeleine safe just half an hour before Kate discovered her missing. Yet later, Matt revised his account. In his revised statement, he admitted that he hadn't actually seen Madeleine at all. He said he only listened at the door, heard what he thought were the sounds of quiet breathing, and assumed everything was fine. A single change of detail, from seeing to merely hearing, completely shifted the certainty of the timeline. Without a visual confirmation, there was no reliable evidence that Madeleine was alive at 9:30 p.m. Then came Jane Tanner's testimony. At approximately 9:15 p.m., Jane claimed to have seen a man carrying a child away from the direction of apartment 5A. Her description quickly became the foundation of the abduction theory. But here, too, doubt crept in. At that very same moment, Jerry McCann was standing outside the apartment, speaking with a neighbor, Jez Wilkins. Both men insisted they never saw Jane walk past them, despite the fact that she claimed to have walked directly by. How could three adults be in such close proximity, in such a crucial moment, and yet not see each other? The inconsistencies weren't confined to the group alone. Restaurant staff at the Tapas bar also gave statements that clashed with the parents' timeline. One waiter reported seeing a man leave the table for around 15 minutes, and another man gone for nearly 30. He even thought the second man might have been Jerry McCann. A second waiter also recalled a man missing for about 15 minutes. But the group's version of events insisted that their checks took only a few minutes, barely enough time to walk the short path to the apartments and return. 15 to 30 minutes was not a quick check. It was long enough for something significant to happen, and yet no one in the group admitted to being gone that long. Compounding the confusion was the architecture of the Ocean Club apartments. Each unit had two possible entry points, a front door that locked with a key and a sliding patio door that could only be locked from the inside. If the parents truly locked their apartments as they claimed, then the system of rotating checks would have been nearly impossible without constantly exchanging keys. Yet there was no mention of key sharing in any of their statements. When pieced together, these contradictions painted a troubling picture. The last confirmed sighting of Madeleine outside the group was at 6:30 p.m. by David Payne. After that, every alleged sighting came from within the circle, clouded by revisions, contradictions, and logistical impossibilities. What emerged was not a clear timeline, but a patchwork of uncertainty. Each inconsistency, Oldfield's shifting statement, Tanner's uncorroborated sighting, the waiter's testimony, the door logistics, pulled the threads of the narrative looser. The deeper investigators pushed, the more it seemed the night's events had been reconstructed not from solid facts, but from fragile recollections and protective alignments. And in the gaps between those recollections, doubt took root. As the investigation unfolded, another dimension of the Madeleine McCann case became impossible to ignore: the psychology of silence. The Tapas Seven were not strangers. They were close friends, bound by years of shared history, professional respect, and family ties. When tragedy struck, those bonds became both their shield and their prison. Sociologists describe this phenomenon as diffused responsibility. When a group faces a crisis, accountability spreads so thin that no one feels able or willing to break away and tell a conflicting story. In the McCann case, the Tapas Seven faced not only the horror of a missing child, but also the knowledge that their decisions, particularly the choice to leave young children unattended in locked or unlocked apartments, might expose them to accusations of negligence. And negligence, in the glare of international media, could destroy reputations, careers, and families. One member of the group illustrates this tension vividly: Diane Webster, the elderly mother of Fiona Payne. Unlike the others, she was not a parent of young children, nor was she directly involved in the rotation of checks. Reports later suggested that she expressed quiet surprise at the very idea of a child-checking routine. If the system had been as established and orderly as the group later claimed, why would Diane have been caught off guard by it? Her hesitations hinted that the routine might have been improvised after Madeleine vanished, reconstructed in hindsight to make the group appear more diligent. For professionals like the McCanns and their friends, many of them doctors, the stakes were even higher. Within the medical community, trust and reputation are currency. To be linked too closely to a scandalous disappearance risked more than personal embarrassment. It risked careers. Speaking out with doubts or admitting uncertainty could invite not just media scrutiny, but professional isolation. Silence in that context wasn't just self-protection, it was survival. Fear amplified the silence further: fear of legal repercussions in Portugal, fear of media vilification back home in Britain, fear that social services might question their parenting if the full truth of their holiday habits came to light. Even those who may have held private doubts faced a suffocating calculation. To break from the group meant to stand alone, and standing alone meant becoming a target. And so, for 17 years, the Tapas Seven have maintained a remarkable public quiet. While Kate and Jerry McCann appeared frequently in interviews, campaigns, and books, their friends stayed firmly out of the spotlight. Not one has chosen to sit for a media interview or to clarify the discrepancies that still haunt the timeline. That silence, whether born of loyalty, fear, or necessity, has become one of the case's most enduring mysteries. But silence is never neutral. It shapes how the world interprets events. In the Madeleine McCann case, the absence of testimony from those who shared that dinner table has allowed suspicion to thrive. Was it a pact of silence? Or was it simply the human instinct to close ranks when chaos threatens to tear lives apart? Whatever the reason, the effect is the same. The truth, if it exists among them, remains locked away, guarded not by lies, but by the heavy, unyielding weight of silence. 17 years have passed since the night Madeleine McCann vanished from apartment 5A in Praia da Luz. Yet the echoes of that evening remain as sharp and haunting as ever. The case is not only about the disappearance of a child, it has become a story about memory, fear, and the silence that binds people together when truth feels too dangerous to face. From the first hours, the timeline was fragile, built not on surveillance footage or indisputable evidence, but on statements that shifted, blurred, and sometimes contradicted one another. The last independent sighting of Madeleine was reported by David Payne at 6:30 p.m., yet it stands on testimony alone, uncorroborated by any outside witness. After that, every detail, every so-called check, every sighting, every memory came solely from within the circle of friends. The handwritten timeline scribbled on the back of Madeleine's storybook became more than just notes. It became a symbol of how fragile truth can be when filtered through fear and group alignment. The sliding door Jerry admitted leaving open, the window Kate reported as forced, the contradictory accounts of checks, the waiter's testimony that didn't match. Each piece created fractures, and in those fractures, doubt flourished. Investigators, journalists, and the public were left to sift through a patchwork of impressions, wondering where memory ended and reconstruction began. But perhaps the greatest mystery is not the disappearance itself, but the silence that followed. For nearly 2 decades, the Tapas 7 have never spoken publicly. Not one has stepped forward to clarify, to challenge, or even to express lingering doubts. Their silence has become a fortress, shielding them from scrutiny, but also casting shadows over everything they claim to remember. Was it loyalty? Was it fear? Or was it simply the crushing instinct to protect themselves and their families from the unforgiving storm of media and suspicion? The tragedy is that silence does not erase questions. It amplifies them. Each year that passes without clarity hardens the perception that someone, somewhere in that group of 9 adults, may know more than they've ever admitted. Perhaps it was a detail misremembered, perhaps a mistake made in panic, or perhaps something far darker. Whatever the truth, silence has preserved it, locked away where no investigator or journalist can reach. And so, the question remains, will anyone ever break that silence? If only 2 or 3 people truly know what happened to Madeleine, are they still willing, or even able to speak? Or has the silence itself become permanent, not because the truth is forgotten, but because fear of its consequences has made it unspeakable? In the end, the disappearance of Madeleine McCann is a story not only of loss, but of how silence can shape justice, memory, and history. The world still waits for answers, but perhaps the final silence, the one that could shatter this mystery, has already settled, unbroken and unbreakable.